So good morning, and thank you for tuning in to this webinar in relation to fintech. We aim to explore some of the legal and practical challenges in launching a fintech platform. We at Meyerson have recently experienced a large number of queries from people wishing to either expand existing platforms or to set up new fintech type platforms. I would like to introduce myself, my colleague Carla Murray, and Wesley Wilkes, who is the Chief Executive of Iron Market and of a newly established fintech platform called Fint, which we helped Wes set up. Firstly, a bit about each of us. Carla, you first.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, I'm Carla Murray. I'm a partner here at Meyerson. I head the commercial team and the tech sector. I've worked in the tech sector for over 16 years now, drafting a variety of technology contracts, acting for clients who are procuring technology solutions, and also developers that implement and install technology solutions. I just hand back to Chris.
Thanks, Carla. Yes, I'm a corporate partner in our corporate team here at Meyerson, but I have a background in the financial services industry and in regulation, and I head up our financial services group, and we routinely look at the regulations as they apply to companies of this type. And Wes?
Yeah, Wes, CEO of Iron Market Wealth and the wider Net Worth Network. I've been working in financial services for 23 years as financial advisor, and for the last roughly 10 as a discretionary investment manager too, and also launched a fintech app, so a financial investment app, which actually went live this year, and worked on it for over 2 years prior to that, along with Meyerson.
Thank you. When establishing a platform of this type, it's important to really think through things from the outset. And I think Carla has some very interesting insights into the different stages of the journey, and particularly the preliminary phase. Carla.
Yeah, and it's fair to say that the best place to start obviously is at the beginning. So you've had your idea for a platform that you want to develop, and we just thought we'd touch on what some of the initial considerations are and thought processes that developers go through at this stage. So really, the initial consideration is, do you fully understand what it is that you want to develop? Do you have a clear understanding of the functionality of your application or platform? And this is kind of as clear as it can be at the outset, whilst bearing in mind that we appreciate developments are quite fluid and requirements can change. And from what you start with as your concept, it might morph into something slightly different when you come to launch. But just having a bit more of a structured idea as to what the application is going to be doing, what it needs to integrate with, what third-party services it may need, for example. If your platform is undertaking financial transactions, then will you be developing the tools to take those payments, or are you looking at using, say, a third-party gateway payment provider, and does the functionality offered by them fit with how you want that to operate on your platform? It's about sort of thinking about your roadmap as well, and what developments you may want to have in what post-launch as well, so you can start to lay down the groundwork at that stage. Thinking about, have you got user accounts? Can users upload content? Will you be storing that content yourself, or looking for a third party to provide storage and hosting facilities? It really is just mapping out what that user journey looks like as well, and thinking about the data that might be collected. Again, all of this is important because it has different legal implications. Touching on financial data and data, for example, thinking about whether you're going to be collecting personal data and what protections you need to have in place for that, which then brings you into the realms of thinking about GDPR. Have you got the controls and security in place? Are you looking at having a third party to host that data, for example? And if so, where's that hosting facility situated? Because obviously, if it's in the UK, fairly comfortable, you can comply then with the GDPR requirements. Likewise in Europe, But then if you go further afield and outside of those areas, then you need to start thinking about, does the destination have an adequacy decision in respect of it, so you can safely transfer that data out and across to the hosting provider? Or are you going to have to take extra steps and safeguards and put those in place to allow you to transfer the data out? So I think those are sort of, all of that ties in with the mapping exercise, and it allows you to consider these things kind of at the outset and have a bit of a high level view of some potential legal issues that may crop up. That's more from the legal side of things for contracts and data protection. But Chris, is there anything more sort of specific for financial sector that also needs to be borne in mind?
Absolutely, there is. So the key thing at the outset from a regulatory perspective is to do an analysis of the regulatory perimeter. What permissions do you require to conduct this business, and do you already have those permissions, or are you going to have to apply for a variation or additional permissions? That's a very key component. As then is thinking about the time scale, should you need to make any of those applications, and how that plays into the time scale for launching the platform. The other thing to think about from a regulatory perspective, as you look at the mapping of the data flow and the mapping of the customer journey, is how that fits with the consumer duty. And the two are very broadly aligned, but they do both need to be considered separately. And it would be interesting to get Wes's insights as someone who's done all this on the ground, in terms of how you saw that initial phase and how fluid it was.
Yeah, really interesting. Particularly obviously the way that you guys both come at it from your professional background, because again, from someone like me as a founder, and who really, I guess, is coming from an ideation perspective. So someone who is working in the financial services sector, so has a working knowledge of that, but actually really this has come from an idea and a solution that we want to provide to consumers. So very much driven by a drive to do something and answer a question or answer a problem that we think needs answering, and then focusing so much on what we think that journey needs to look like for that consumer. Which is fantastic and really, really important, but that has to be underpinned by all the points that you guys have covered, both from a legal perspective and also from a financial services perspective. So from my perspective as an existing financial services company and practicing financial services company, I already knew we had the permissions to deliver what Vint is as an investing app and discretionary model portfolios. But being able to look ahead into some of the legal requirements and ramifications, such as the points that Carl has outlined with GDPR, and wider points, that probably wasn't on the radar. So I think it's hugely important to partner very early on, as you pointed out, to actually then look ahead, think ahead of what your kind of what the exciting roadmap looks like in terms of what you want to deliver to consumers and what you're trying to create. Then have that underpinned by almost a parallel roadmap of the various legal and regulatory points that are going to support that and make sure it's something that's still exciting for the consumer and delivering an amazing product, but is actually obviously within the rules and keeps everyone safe.
That's a really interesting point, actually, Wes, because having that at the forefront, interesting that you said, it's only through your experience and talking it with ourselves when you were launching your platform, that privacy by design doesn't sound like it was necessarily at the forefront initially. But that's certainly something that the ICO is encouraging everybody to do. And you're probably not on your own, that there'll be lots of businesses out there developing apps that aren't quite aware that there is this privacy by design concept, which marries in with, and as you say, then allows you to have that legal roadmap to think about that user journey and the data or every step of the way. So that's quite interesting. So just moving on from that, the next sort of phase as we see it on the roadmap is to start the development of the platform. And at that stage, it's thinking about whether you yourself have the skills to do the development work, or do your employees have that skill set, or actually are you going to engage a third party to do the development for you? And if you are engaging with a third party for them to provide development services, then what issues I suppose you need to think about at the outset in terms of being able to provide them with the information about your idea and about your plans in a safe manner. And so what we would suggest at that stage is to enter into a confidentiality agreement and IPR agreement with the developer, so that you are able to freely pass on your ideas. You may have storyboards, written pieces of information that you want to pass over, all of which you're passing that idea and that concept and your vision over to a third party. Unless you have something in place with them, what's to stop them just going, yeah, that's a great idea, thanks very much, off I go, I'm going to develop it myself, and cut you out of that marketplace. So what we do in a confidentiality agreement is not only protect your confidential information and your trade secrets and the idea itself, but also make it very clear if, as part of those initial discussions, you are expecting the developer to come back with, say, mock-ups and initial plans for you to have a think about with the proposal. Well, who then owns that documentation and that work that's potentially done at the outset? Because a business is unlikely to want to allow the third party developer to keep those project plans and that information and use it once, if the parties decided to part ways and not enter into a formal agreement. So it's making sure you've got protections in place around that very sort of sensitive time. And then once you've agreed terms, you've settled on a proposal, you've agreed a price, thinking about, well, are you agreeing a fixed price and a fixed term, or is it a time and materials basis? And that's sort of a commercial consideration, but should then be mapped into the terms of the development contract. And I would always advocate having a really robust development agreement in place at the outset. And because what it does then is it protects your IP position moving forward. So, engaging a third party to do the development work just because you're paying them for that development doesn't mean that you then own the IP in the end product, unless you specifically state in your agreement that they're assigning over those intellectual property rights to you. And there's a lot of businesses that I'm aware of that get caught out by that. They just assume because they're paying somebody to do something for them, then naturally that they own that end deliverable. So yeah, being clear in your intellectual property provisions and thinking about, is the developer going to be using third-party software? Have you agreed what platform it's going to operate on and how it needs to integrate with that? And have you agreed whether they can use third-party open source software, for example? And are you comfortable with the terms of the open source software license? You don't want to find yourself in a position where you've signed up to having open source in your application, but the terms of that open source license is such that you then have to make your source code available for others to use and adapt, because it takes away your commercial advantage. And Chris, I presume that also has an impact then on the value of the business that you're looking to develop as well.
Absolutely, yes. If you effectively don't own your IP, then that is a big chunk of value and a big chunk of time and cost that is essentially not being captured and is not available to you going forward.
Yeah.
So yes, this is a very key area.
And then the other thing that I wanted to just touch on as well is thinking about the development method that's going to be followed. Are you looking at an agile methodology where things can adapt and change as part of that development, so it's not as strict and constrained? It allows you to maybe go off a little bit of a tangent, see if extra functionality works, but bring it back in at a later date. Or are you looking for more of a waterfall method where you've got sprint runs and specific deliverables being delivered at certain points in time that you then go through your user acceptance testing and sign off of the product? What kind of method are you looking to engage in that stage? And Wes, how did you find the development process then when you were having the Fint platform developed?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about that now, having been through that process and the other side of it and having a live product, because whilst kind of you do consider a huge amount of that, I think particularly from my perspective and others as non-tech founders of a and I guess a lot of people might well be. They might be thinking more of a, like I said before, thinking of a solution to a problem they've seen, and are not necessarily engineers, technicians, developers themselves. So very much from a non-tech founder perspective, it's almost inevitable that there's going to be third-party developers or agencies involved. And yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it's super, again, I do have an interesting approach in the fact that coming from a financial services background, that side of it, whilst I'm not an expert on COBS rules, I don't know them by form, but I have that overlay already. But in terms of the technical side of things, that's not where I'm coming from. So really important that you have the right level of agreement. For example, we built Vint based on a fixed price arrangement, and it was a waterfall based delivery. Again, all of those things were new to me. They were, yeah, waterfall was definitely something different when I started this project. But understanding that and the next phases, and actually, I think some of the learns from my experience would be to really try and build out that roadmap as early as you can, so that you know that actually this initial development phase, if you've got ideas on how you want to build your product, that actually you just have those floating, even if they're not fully formed ideas, you have those floating as early as possible, because they can impact on the development as you bring it through and the later stages of that. So yeah, particularly important for non-tech founders is to get the agreement set out initially, get the proposals right, get the right kind of development strategy that works for you commercially, and also in terms of delivering the product. Super important.
And I think that's half the battle, isn't it? Because at the outset, things are so fluid that if as you say, if you're following a strict methodology, it can be hard to know clearly at the outset what your requirements are, and to know how you're going to set out what your acceptance tests are going to be, and how you measure, has the application been developed in the way that I wanted it to be, and can we test that? And so that's sort of part of a battle for the lawyers to try and capture all of that in the development agreement, whilst also bear in mind that not everything may be, a finalized idea right at the outset. So it's
absolutely. I would add one more thing actually. What the first person I spoke to about when I had the idea of this product was actually Chris. So I think that what probably gave me a good edge in terms of when I then went into knowing that I wasn't going to build this thing, going into kind of getting proposals from various agencies and choosing an agency. I was already coming from a point of having had a conversation from a legal and particularly financial services regulatory legal perspective, knowing the types of things and the challenges we were going to have. So then going into the kind of the beauty parade of agencies and developers, then I think was probably in a stronger position.
That's really good to hear. Yes, yes. And the other thing that sits in the background to all of this, I think, is the way that the contracts and the way that the customer journey then has to play into the development from a regulatory perspective, as well as from just a common sense and commercial perspective.
Yeah.
It's about making that journey as easy as possible, as good as possible, and having the right contracts in the background in terms of things like settlement support and having the customer contracts right, and how that all sits within the platform, and particularly where it sits within that customer journey.
Yeah, and again, I hope I'm not jumping ahead, but in terms of the way that we did that with Fint, that was so good, is we would have a sprint of customer journey design way before development. We'd have a design and a prototype, and then we were able to get around a table and actually break that apart in terms of where the relevant legal and regulatory aspect would need to come into that, and that might then influence design. But because we'd started with that process and had the conversations initially, it gave us that really strong kind of kind of regulatory and legal overlay, which meant that we didn't have to go back too many times with changes in design and journey flow, because we had that constant input along the road, which I think definitely helped us deliver a really good product.
I think that's right, because we have it where we've been talking with clients, on applications, and it's thinking about at what point are you getting the users to accept the terms? What terms are you displaying to them? What do you need to be pointing them to? Do we need to be pointing them to the data protection provisions and the privacy notice? Do we need to be getting them to accept our general platform terms, or the, particularly as you say with the Fin platform, the investment terms, and knowing at what point along that journey should the relevant terms pop up and when they need to be accepted and complied with. And it's the language flow as well, isn't it, Chris? Because we worked quite closely on a few of those documents to ensure that they were presented in a consistent manner, because I think that's also part of that user journey. You don't want them to be having different documents that have all got different tones and in a way that doesn't really fit together in a uniform manner.
Absolutely. And it's vital that you have that sort of end-to-end thinking, and I think that was very helpful. And I think whatever process you put into place, you also have to bear in mind that it won't always flow smoothly, and there will be a few bumps in the road, but hopefully they're bumps in the road that help you in the end. I'm sure you had a few of those.
Quite a lot. and also, like, from a development and journey perspective, because we're creating something from scratch that is a new entity, you have a lot of those things. But equally, consumer duty wasn't in force when we started. And obviously, as Fint is a product of iMarket Wealth as a directly authorized regulated entity, that regulation changes too, not just development, not just the world, not just markets. The regulation changes at a decent clip these days, and I think having that overlay as you're building it gives you an element of flexibility that as things do change, we can input, output, amend what we need to as we move forward.
Yeah, I think that's vital. And I think maybe that's also something to touch on maybe in a few moments' time in terms of the future, because of course these things are live and they evolve. But shall we talk a bit about launch?
Yeah, so obviously you've gone through the process of getting the development, ironing out all of the little kinks along the way, and the product's ready, it's been acceptance tested, you're ready for the go live. Just then thinking about the launch of the product, it's how are you going to launch it? What are you going to be doing as part of that launch? Are you engaging with third parties to provide assistance? So thinking about photo shoots, videos, all of that marketing production. Do you have the terms in place? Because again, it's image rights. It's thinking about, do you have the releases? Can you use the stock photography or the photos that you've commissioned? Can you use them in the arenas, the social media marketing campaigns that you're wanting to undertake? Are you clear with your photographer, for example, that you're going to be using it on social media? You might be using it on Facebook, Instagram, all of those channels. Are they happy for that commercialization of those images? And have you got the necessary consents and releases in place? Those are some things I'm thinking about. Do you have to pay royalty fees? Does it suddenly get infinitely more expensive if you're using the images as part of an email marketing campaign? And I mean, sort of marketing as well, thinking about direct marketing and ensuring that marketing is in accordance with direct marketing regulations and requirements as well. So again, that throws up another myriad of legal compliance hurdles to overcome as well.
Indeed, and from a financial services perspective, it's there's a lot to think about from a financial promotion angle. Getting those messages compliant and done in the right way with the right balance, making sure the presentations are fair, clear, and not misleading, and just generally making sure that we're not falling foul of those rules is a job that shouldn't be underestimated. And particularly in the light of the FCA's current slight crackdown on the use of finfluencers, and of course, Fint, when it launched, used finfluencers, and maybe that's something to say something about, Wes.
Yeah, definitely. I think linking both of those two things together. So we were, I guess, fortunate, but also deliberate in getting both AJ and Curtis Pritchard involved, who were clients originally and were interested in the idea, and then obviously brought them closer and closer in. What that did give us is a couple of opportunities in the fact that I brought them there ultimately into the business, which felt like the right thing to do given what they started to add in terms of help with customer journey and various other points. What that did mean is being part of the business, then we were able to create content that would then be within the app and help to deliver part of the customer journey or the user journey throughout the app. So videos introducing who we are, what we do, how we do it, what the app is for, what it is meant to do. And because we're able to produce those, it also makes the app unique, but also we were able to produce those internally, then also get a view from you guys in terms of the value and the correctness of the content within them, which, inevitably needed a few tweaks.
Get a lawyer involved in anything, and it'll need a few tweaks. We'll find fault with most
quite right. But again, ultimately, was certainly gives us a great delivery in terms of the customer journey in the app. We get a huge amounts of amazing feedback with that being quite unique and makes it very simple, easy to understand, straightforward, which is good for us from a customer acquisition perspective. It makes it easy to acquire customers once we get them to the app. But also we know then that we're doing that safely, and we're delivering that safely, and we're delivering that in a balanced way. And in terms of the way we want to deliver it. But the reality is, when you're so excited about something you're delivering, and that happens now on an ongoing basis, we will still get it wrong. We'll still, particularly with AJ and Kurt, who aren't in our world, aren't in this sector, and to them, almost a lot of it doesn't make sense. When we're not saying anything wrong, no, we're not. But the reality is that regulation and law, particularly financial services regulation and financial promotion, is such a really, really important hot area because of bad actors, not because of us, but because of bad actors. So we need to ensure that we're delivering something that supports that and fits within that framework. So yeah, I think being really deliberate in delivering something that we want to, that is exciting for the consumer, and gets them bought into the product we're trying to deliver. But also we know and we're confident that we've had that oversight and that those kind of sense checks to make sure we're well within the rules and delivering a balanced view. An ongoing challenge, as social media is so fast and so quick, and for example, we know that an Instagram story is only on there for 24 hours. So, that's the limit you're working to. And it's very difficult then within financial promotion rules and within our sector, deliver some engaging content that is also kind of within that. But because we've got that framework of knowing what those rules look like and building within that framework, it does give us a high degree of confidence, even though we still don't get it right first time all the time.
Absolutely. But that is an element that should never be underestimated. And as you say, it has to be an ongoing iteration, simply because of the way of the world these days. Timescales are much shorter than ever they used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think the key, in terms of like touching on the influencer side of things as well, and I think what you've got, where we would strongly differentiate, which is again by getting help and the right kind of advice, is because we have AJ and Curtis, who between them, got a couple of 3 million social followers, so that of our target audience or target demographic. Because we've got them very much integrated into the business, that gives us a huge amount of control and understanding and interest. And I think where a lot have fallen foul, both from the individuals themselves who have promoted products that they may not have understood properly before promoting and have gone foul of the rules, but also those on the other end of that are creating products and think that getting some people on social media that have huge followings is a shortcut to success. I think there's been some huge lessons that there aren't any shortcuts to success, and big followings don't necessarily mean um, accurate or compliant followings. And it's really important to do it right rather than do it quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then I think sort of going forward is very much a question, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
we've got to the point where we've launched, we've got a marketing campaign that's gone out there, that's all been carefully planned. But of course, this is happening live 24/7 for as long as it runs.
Yeah, quite.
And
Yeah.
maybe Carla would like to say a few things about that and about the platform and the future.
Yeah, that's it. And that's, I think, why starting with the good foundations of, as we've said, ensuring you've got the contracts in place with the relevant parties that are going to be involved in the application post launch, is imperative, because you've put all of that groundwork in initially, and that thought process, and mapping your data, mapping your user journey, having to think about what your functionality is going to be and how it all interacts. And as Wes was saying, at what point we're directing customers to various terms, and how we're interacting along the way. Part of that, those discussions with the lawyers, enable you to have the terms drafted in a way that can keep up with the development, so that once you are post-launch, you've got the appropriate terms in place on the platform to manage what the platform's delivering, and to manage your own risk exposure as well, particularly in the financial sector. I think the risks of getting that wrong are quite hefty, aren't they, Chris?
Yes, very, very big. It's a manageable risk, but it's a big risk if you get it wrong. So you really don't want to get it wrong. You also need to have plans in place for if inadvertently you have got it a bit wrong. Okay, what are we going to do? How quickly can we change things? How quickly can we deal with it? And one of the last things you want to be involved in is any form of customer detriment by having to pull the website down for any length of time, for example, where customers can't access their money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think adding on to that, I mean, we do have quite a few moving parts in Fint, because ultimately, whilst we have permissions to manage and build portfolios on a discretionary basis, we don't have permissions, the right permissions to have custody of client assets. So we have to have the right partner for that. We have an amazing algorithm that helps us build portfolios based on macroeconomic data. But again, that needs to come from a third-party source. So that, I guess our app sits in the middle of with an open architecture with a lot of moving parts. And I think one of the really interesting things, actually, I think others would find valuable, whilst having the right agreements in place with those third parties are really, really important. What was really super important actually was when we got into the weeds of it, and Chris will probably recall this, it was actually the accountability side. So where are our lines drawn?
Yeah.
Where are their lines drawn? And it can be, it's not as black and white as it seems. It's not straightforward. It's really, that getting into the weeds of where that accountability sits in certain circumstances, even down to, if one part of those moving parts was down for a certain period of time, what does that time look like? Where does that accountability sit for that time? And that depth of challenge and that depth of agreement, I can sleep at night knowing that we've got all that in place, and I know that the lines are drawn in terms of accountability. God forbid, should something happen to any of those parties, in terms of it just breaking down, or the parties themselves. And I know I can sleep at night knowing that accountability is all set out. But it's not enough just to have agreements. It's the depth within that.
That's a really good point, because practically, like you say, if you're assessing availability and uptimes, and parties, when they're negotiating these contracts, can get really entrenched in thinking, oh, we must have service credits, and we must, the liability, we need this cap in place, and manage our exposure. But it's great to, you absolutely need to think about that. But I would always say to clients, on a practical basis, though, that financial service credit, that recompense, is that going to cover the potential loss? Does that help you in the situation when actually you just need the thing up and running? And more so with a financial platform, that, as Chris was saying, if customers can't access their money and their investments, it's more significant risk exposure for you. So yes, it's great if you can have a service credit regime in place, but actually you want to be able to look at being able to force that support, to have that support there in the first place, to stop, either one, stop it going wrong, and two, if it does, if something does go wrong, jump on it, priority, and get it up and running, and with as minimal disruption as possible. So I think the two really do sort of go hand in hand, and having that understanding of the realities of what arena the platforms are operating in, and on a day-to-day basis, what are the risks to your business, and are we then adequately providing for that within the contract, rather than just taking, oh well, this has been in a contract before, let's pull that clause across, actually thinking about what the practical implications are for the business.
And it has huge implications and importance then, actually, when you go a step back to vendor selection. Because if those levels of accountability and responsibility aren't supported by the infrastructure your vendor has, no matter who they are, then really that goes back to that they might not be the right vendor for you, particularly in financial services, because of the increased levels of risk. Yeah, totally agree.
So before we conclude, a few questions really, mostly for Wes, and obviously Carla will chip in as and when. But what would you say went well, and what would you say perhaps went a bit less well in terms of the launch of Fint?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure anybody would answer this in the same way to start off with, is that it takes longer than you think and it costs more than you think, which I think is fair of most things in life in general, but certainly of products and fintech products. I think for me, if probably to answer that, I wouldn't change anything I did, but to answer that in terms of with the benefit of hindsight, I think what I've explained a lot today probably would have been to get a little bit more into the weeds at the start about what I wanted that journey to look like. Now, of course, a lot of that has developed over the last couple of years as we've been building it. So some of those ideas weren't there then. But I think really spending time to envisage a build out of your product in terms of the service you want to deliver and the various areas you want to go into. Even, for example, if you wanted to move overseas, really giving that some thought, a lot of depth of thought initially, even though there might not be things that you implement straight away, that gives then would probably overlay the thought process in terms of the journey and any legal and financial and regulatory implications as you build out the product. So that would be the one thing for me. The design element is probably add double time that you think in terms of the design element of that, because again, design is one thing, how you would like it to flow. You want it to be as quick and easy as possible. Absolutely, who doesn't? But the reality is you need to give your user and your customer plenty of opportunity to understand, to check, to read through that journey. So I think the reality is being willing to accept that needs to be broadened out a little bit, and that will inevitably mean a butt of head, because you want an easy, smooth onboarding process, an exciting onboarding process, because you've created a product and a commercial entity that you want to be successful, and you want to deliver amazing outcomes for your consumers. But in doing that, that has to be with an overlay of regulatory and legal oversight. So yeah, I'll get back to the question again now, I think, a little bit.
Good and bad. So
yeah, sure. Yeah,
good
yeah.
things.
Yeah, so I think from a good thing perspective, whilst we've got lots of ideas on and speaking more about obviously very specifically about Fin, about ideas that how we want to build that out and create an amazing consumer experience and a consumer-based financial app both for investing and actually personal finance more generally. I think the bottom line is we have an absolutely brilliant app, a brilliant investing app for those that are just getting started in investing. I have a huge amount, like I say, in terms of sleeping at night, I don't worry at all because I know the way we have built it has been built with that thread of regulatory and legal oversight that is very naturally very heavy as you build it. Once you've built it, because you've built it the right way, actually, that need and requirement then really is more a finesse element. um, Rules change. We need to change documents. We understand that. But because we've built that with that thread throughout it, that's a much more comfortable way of iterating and improving as you go along. So I think that the good thing is doing that along the way means we've got a fantastic app that could run forever, with minor and any amendments that are made from a journey or a legal or regulatory perspective are so well supported within the build we currently have that wouldn't cause any disruption at all.
And I think with that, Wes, you've got the terms that kind of back that up as well. So for example, your user terms and your platform terms, it allows you to have that fluidity, doesn't it? It allows the platform to develop and change, but also it's backed up that you can change your terms that need to be changed to reflect that, so that you can reflect, if there's a change in regulation, if there's a change in functionality, you can amend those terms and you're bringing it to the consumer's attention at the relevant point in time without too much of a, as you say, it's not interrupting that user journey and that user experience. Because I think there is a risk then if you're having to constantly put up pop-ups and notification, it can disrupt that user journey. But if you've already got that baked into the documentation that's on the platform at the outset, with in mind that this platform will need to develop and will need to be able to flex and adapt as the change in regulatory environment changes, then I think that's also important as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And that goes back to the point of probably taking a little bit longer than you think, but spending that time to make sure you've got that those things in place that makes it less disruptive, because we know things change. They change constantly. We've had regulatory budgets, all kinds of stuff that have happened just this year, that would have an impact or an influence on what we do most, both at iMarket but also particularly within the app. But yeah, having that set up and built within the frame that we've built means zero disruption for our users, and they can just log on and see how well their money's doing. It's great. Yeah.
Fantastic. And finally, what would you say the future holds?
Yeah, in terms of Fintech, we've got a pretty healthy roadmap. Too many few ideas away, but we're very, very, as you know, the reason we created this app was out of a little bit of frustration of what I saw happening in 2020 and 2021, where you saw a new generation of investors with amazing amount of energy and wanting to start investing, but through Reddit boards and all kinds of different influence and TikTok were led down roads that weren't great. We're the really dark parts of cryptocurrency that broke down. Various meme stocks that ultimately broke down, and we're just having terrible experience. So my view was, well, I wish I could talk to all these people and tell them what we do as a financial planner and a discretionary manager, but I can't talk to all these people. So let's build an app to try and reach them. So I think it's taken that further. So the next step actually is we're just scoping out now to build an education dashboard or an education suite within the app, and that's going to have two kind of verticals. One is for education around investing and what that means and various products involved, what they all mean, and education about what you already hold if you're invested with us, but also a personal finance element, and broaden that out to really educate, um, uh, mainly younger people, younger investors, newer investors, but hopefully it can work for anyone, about personal finance and getting started early and what that means, and broadening that out. And then actually the wider roadmap is to build that into and make the app really a go-to point for anybody thinking about finance and how they might want to manage their money better, budget their money, build a plan for the future, and start investing.
And that's quite a nice sort of step on, isn't it, from what schools are doing now? Because I know schools are, as part of the social education, personal social development for students, they roll out some financial sessions for teenagers to get involved in. So it's like the next natural step along the way, isn't it, of that education process to ensure.
And I think whether we like it or not, that everybody now, but certainly the generations coming through, go to their phone first to learn something, and we need to just accept that, but actually take part and get involved in that. We can't assume that the education around finance and financial issues is going to be enough sitting in a classroom facing a teacher. I think the reality is that we know that actually where our younger generations are on a day-to-day basis, and they're in this thing. So we need to be in that thing if we want to help educate and help bring help people build a financial future, rather than that they'll. I've been in financial advice now for 20 odd years, and I've lost count of the amount of people I've seen that got to 40, 45 and had a bad experience historically and thought, need to do something about it. But if we're going to stop that and help people get on board earlier and create a better financial future for themselves and create choice in the future, then we need to go where they are, not expect that they're going to come to us. So yeah, hugely important going forward.
Fantastic. And I think that's probably all we have time for today. Thank you to everyone who has watched this, and thank you for your time and participation. And please, our contact details are on the final sheet. If there are any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you.